to ask people is, what experience from your background, or how has your upbringing influenced the person that you are today?
Had a really nice childhood. And there were a lot of things that were happening outside of my formal education process, which encouraged me to be expressive, confident, really resilient, and quite joyous. So I did a lot of theatre, did a lot of dance, I did a lot of workshopping and creative things from a very early age. So my parents, I would say, really invested a lot of time in making sure that I was always engaged with something. So activities were in abundance. And I think being in a situation where I was in a performative state almost built confidence without me being really consciously aware of it from a really early age.
Now, a stereotype about the Caribbean diaspora is people outside the Caribbean who live in London, New York and Canada.
Bizarre.
Bizarre.
We're in Birmingham.
But we're in Birmingham.
We're in Birmingham.
What is it about is there anything in particular about growing up in Birmingham from a Caribbean background that has influenced the kind of woman?
Yeah, man, because like Birmingham is such a hub of blackness in all its forms and all of the diasporas of, you know, what black culture may mean to you. So of course we've got a big Caribbean community, not just Jamaican. And that's something commonly people will assume, you know, if you're black and you're Caribbean and you're in Birmingham, then you must be of Jamaican heritage, and that is not always the case. So we've got a big Caribbean community in Birmingham, but also a very big West African community, and the influence, I guess, of those communities within Birmingham in terms of food shops, hair, you know, music, access to arts, festivals and events that happen. That's always been something that's been prevalent in Birmingham. Birmingham's got a long history of, you know, black community art spaces being really highly profiled and always being accessible. And of course, we've always had a tradition of carnival in Birmingham as well. So outside of Notting Hill and Leeds, we've always had the Birmingham Carnival. It's not as big as it once was, but it's something that's certainly been etched into my memory from my childhood and my early teens. You know, that was a big thing. And as I said, it's something that I think people outside of Birmingham may be unaware of, but most certainly if you're in Birmingham or in the Midlands, you know, Birmingham's a hub. We've got lots of things always going on.
So today I'm obviously here because I'm interested in education, younger children, early years. And early years is a setting that I don't get to experience quite a lot, being on the other end of the spectrum. So I was thinking to myself, because of this place, and I love history, so I want to ask you about how did this place start? And obviously you're a young woman, so it didn't start with you, it started with somebody else.
I look young, but the truth is, I'm 58. So the history of the nurseries, because we have 3 day nurseries, and when I say we, I'm talking about my mother and me. It's a family business, fundamentally at the foundation of what we are doing. This is a family business, this is a we business, and all of my family have been involved in different ways, shapes, form. And when I talk about family, I'm talking about my immediate nuclear family that, you know, I've grown up with. So I grew up with my mother and my father and my 2 younger sisters. So I'm the eldest of 3. And the late 80s is when my mum bought the first nursery, and that's in an area called Bearwood in Birmingham. And I used to actually attend that nursery. So I used to go to the nursery, and towards the end of kind of me leaving the nursery to go to reception, the nursery became available to purchase, to buy as a nursery, as a business. And my mum had always been interested in having a business. She didn't know what business she wanted to have, but her and my dad had always really been interested in having some sort of business. So my mum's from a secretarial background, and my dad at the time was working in finances. And the opportunity came to kind of have or buy or look into getting the first nursery. And at the time, my granddad, my mum's father, he lived in Coventry. Both my parents, when they came from the Caribbean, settled in Coventry. And the finances were raised between mum and dad's own personal savings, bank loan, and my granddad. And the first nursery, the finances were raised to purchase the business. So that was the late 80s. And then moving towards the early 90s, my mum was told by a parent at the first nursery that Edgbaston Park had been put up for sale. She was interested in getting another business because the first business was going quite well. There was a need for childcare in the 80s. We were moving away from perhaps thinking of childminders as the traditional route for childcare, and other smaller childcare facilities. It's looking at the private day nursery market. It was really growing. It was really starting to expand, and the opportunity came for her to buy Edgbaston Park Day Nursery. That happened early 90s. My mum acquired the second business, and then through that kind of journey of now managing two businesses, a young family, also having moved from Coventry to Birmingham, there were a lot of transitional things that were happening. My mum actually had, when I think about it, just had her third child, my youngest sister, when she had bought this nursery here. So yeah, it was a very, very young family. And at that time, my mum was the age that I am now, 37, going on 38. So the structure of things was very different, and it was really interesting when I kind of thought about it in a reflective stance about the journeys that my mum has had, or the journeys that she's kind of been on up to now, and the journey that I'm now on 16 years into managing Edgbaston Park Day Nursery. How similar but also how different the journeys have been. So yeah, this is my approach in 16 years managing the setting. And the journey for me started after I kind of left uni. I was working in retail. I did an English and theatre degree because, as I said earlier, that's what I loved. So the arts was something that was just a natural progression for me to go into and to study and to look into. But that again gave me the tools that I think that I needed to come into expanding, building upon and creating this nursery space and setting and early years environment. Because when I came out of retail, I thought about what could I utilise these skills that I've got for. I always knew that I liked people. I had a very, very deep interest in Black communities. I had an interest in the migration of Black communities in the UK. Been really interested in my granddad's story about how he came to the UK from Jamaica. Always been interested in the oral histories that I kind of learnt from my grandmother who stayed in Jamaica. And really, we as a family were always visiting and going back and forth. So every year we would go to Jamaica and spend a period of a 6-week holiday in Jamaica with both sets of grandparents. So my grandmother had 9 other children with her husband, and then my dad's parents, were in Jamaica as well. So there'd always been this link between the Caribbean and the UK, and also the link between family and how that was built upon to create a foundation of business, having a sense of economics, and having a sense of kind of progression.
One thing is that when I come to Birmingham, stereotypically, I'm normally in Handsworth, Newtown, places where traditionally, Perry Bar, places traditionally where Black people have lived for generations. Now, we're in Edgbaston, which is, when I think of Edgbaston, I think of the cricket ground, and I also think about, it's a place where you do get middle class. I hate the word ethnic minorities, but you do get clusters.
Yeah.
Definitely, for sure, but it's predominantly white. Now, I've met the lovely children here today. Like you said before, it's not a black nursery. The population of children, almost every single child is black.
All of the children, really.
So considering that you were literally on the corner set of a residential area, why do you think that is?
I think this is just actually, again, this word comes up, affinity. This is not a black nursery. It's a nursery where all of the children that happen to attend are black or brown. And when I say brown, I mean South Asian families. They are the two demographics that I serve. And that isn't because there is a poster of Martin Luther King or Malcolm X outside of the nursery. It isn't because I have said you can only be here if you are black. It's because of affinity, it's because of reputation, it's because of word of mouth, and it's because of cultural compatibility. There is something where as groups of people feel like there is somebody that's going to recognise, celebrate, embrace without question, without misunderstanding. There's something around being comfortable within that I think the early years sector doesn't always identify in its truest form. There's a new phrase, a new term that's out at the moment, which I know you're going to be aware of, cultural capital. And it's a new buzzword now. So yeah, we're not going to talk about diversity or cultural compatibility. We're going to talk about cultural capital. How do you recognise the cultural capital of children who attend your setting? And that links into a lot of the work that I do here at Edgbaston Park, and a lot of the work that I pride myself on doing way before cultural capital became a buzzword, or it's going to become a buzzword. People who work in the early years, people that work in education, people are aware of, the 3 I's now, intent, implementation, impact of everything that you're doing. Way before that was here, we were doing that anyway. And as communities, we were always self-reliant, we were always building, we were always organising, we were always doing things for the community, and it was coming out of a community space. And this nursery, I think what's very unique about it is that it blends that community self-help organisational feel with, it's quite corporate, it's business, because we're in the middle of Edgbaston and we're on what is known as the Calthorpe Estate. And the history of the Calthorpe Estate is very interesting in terms of it being, quite a sacred land. If you look into the Calthorpe Estate and what it has been known for and what it is linked to, that a black woman should own a building on the Calthorpe Estate is very, 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 very interesting. So all of these things don't happen by accident. I believe they have happened for a reason and they were meant to have happened, and that only black and brown children attend this setting in an area where every corner there are day nurseries on this road. In this small, within a 3-mile radius, there are loads of nurseries, and we all offer very, very different things. Something very interesting has happened recently, a decision that I've made, which links to 2 things actually. We have always been a nursery which offer nursery places from 4 weeks old to 5 years, 4.5. The baby room is a room which will always need the most highly skilled practitioners, and it will need the most consistency in terms of the practitioners that are in that room, because babies need that 1-to-1 care. Although the legal ratio is 1-to-3, 1-to-1 care, it's not always possible, but there has to be a level of attention. If you imagine if you're bringing your child to the nursery at,
4 weeks.
Crazy. We've never had a baby that's been that young. The youngest that we've had is 3 months, but that's still very, very young.
Yeah, it is.
Right? So it means that there's an expectation around the quality of the care. And as a nursery manager, that quality of care has always been paramount to me. I've always wanted to make sure that if you're trusting us, me, my staff team, that baby has to be really, really, of course, looked after. Now, what I've noticed is there's a trend in, and this is across the education field, I've seen as staff retention, retainment, recruitment has been so hard. Newly qualified teachers are dropping out at the highest rates. People that are coming into the early years sector may have a degree in early years, but coming into a sector which traditionally and historically does not pay. Who's going to stay in a sector where they're not going to be salaried? You're going to be traditionally on, you know, minimum wage. Finding the right practitioners to be employed within a nursery setting where you're offering such personalised, tailored, you know, culturally compatible care has been a task. My longest serving members of staff have been with me for 10 years. My deputy manager has been with me for 10 years. My nursery cook has been with me for over 10 years. You know, these are black women who have actually, in a sense, committed and given me large chunks of their lives to make sure that we are meeting the needs of these children and these families. But baby room has always been quite hard to staff. And recently I've made the decision to close my baby room down because I am not able to retain quality staff who, in this particular climate as well, economically, it's very hard. People might have an idea about wanting to come and work in nurseries, work with babies, work with children, but bills still have to get paid, and we're still a business. And what I've had to do over the past couple of months since summer is staff my baby room with agency. And agency staff are very expensive, quality is never excellent, and also they don't know their children and families. And for children and families, that's key, particularly here when the demographic is that all of my children are Black African Caribbean. That familiarity, that cultural compatibility, shouldn't ever be overlooked. And I've really struggled to make sure that that can be maintained. So I had to make the decision to close my baby room. Currently I've got 10 babies. Now the impact of that has been really, really big. And I'm not saying that I'm closing the baby room and you can just go elsewhere. What I've actually said is that I'm closing my baby room and I'm asking parents to relocate to our other nursery setting.
Okay, all right.
Which is 5 minutes in the car from here. But even the prospect of that for some of my children and families has been a lot. For some of the mothers, it's been like, well, no, like Edgbaston Park's like home. Like, who's going to be looking after my child there? I moved my one permanent staff member that I have to the other nursery to make sure there's some kind of continuity of care. But what I've looked at from a business sense, me and my mum both, is that the other nursery has less babies, more floor space. It can accommodate all of my babies. There are a staff team there that already exists. They've already been working there for a period of time. They know the runnings of the nursery. But there's still this gap in cultural compatibility. And it's not to say that you have to be black to look after black children, but it is to say there has to be a heightened awareness around the cultural needs that need to be met for black families.
I've been in a few conversations and I've always heard this statement, and I don't know whether the person's coming from a good place or a bad place, and it's, I don't see colour. Now, why is that a dangerous statement? I think it's a dangerous, personally, just so people listening to this, I'm not interviewing you saying this, I'm putting you on the spot. I think it's a dangerous statement.
I think it's a dangerous statement.
Why do you personally think it's a
because
dangerous statement?
It's the worst kind of racism. It's well-meaning racism. It's, you know, the Guardian reader racism. It is the white person that wants to appear to you to be the inclusive white practitioner, educator, head teacher. We don't see colour. Everybody here is treated the same. Well, actually, I don't want you to treat me the same. I want you to be aware that my culture, my heritage, the colour of my skin, it says something about who I am, and I want you to recognise that. I want you to recognise that when you're looking after the children. I want you to be aware that there are, you know, certain experiences that I am going to have as a black woman, or I'm going to have as a black child, that I want you to be aware of and help me prepare for. If you are my educator, if you're my educarer, if you are my parent, if you are an auntie and uncle, you know, whoever, I want you to be aware of that. If you don't share the same culture as me, I want you to make sure that you are educating yourself around that and what the impact is going to be of you not doing that. I'm going to feel the brunt of it. So knowing that after the children have, you know, wiped their faces after dinner or tea or breakfast here, make sure you cream my face. These are things that we overlook, you know. But it's very important at Edgbaston Park. Everybody's face is shiny because cream needs to be applied, and so it should be. I don't want to see any dry faces here. Now, that might not necessarily be the cultural practice of a white child, but it's a cultural practice for black children, and it's something that the parents, something as little as that, it holds massive weight to the families that we serve here. And so one of the questions that, one of my black mothers had asked when I was talking about the closure of the babe room is, Liz, what are the staff like at the other nursery? And what I read between the lines of that was a very simple question. Are they black? Are there any black staff there? Are they going to be able to meet the cultural needs of my child? And I have a very good, fluid relationship with my families here. Me and my mums, me and my dads, we speak about everything. It's very casual, because it is, our vision, our ethos here is that it's a home from home environment. So when you come here, I want you to be able to talk to me about any and everything. I don't want you to feel that there's an us and them, because this is another thing. We have to make sure that parents, families feel like they can access the space that's providing care and education for their children. Not seeing colour is a big problem, and a lot of educational establishments, like to say this as I said, some kind of pacifier. It doesn't work like that. I don't want you to not see colour. As I said, I want you to appreciate, understand, have an awareness of the impacts of my culture and the racial group that I am a part of, if you like, because race has massive implications in this society that we're living in. This is 2019 Britain, and we can't be under any illusion that racism doesn't exist or that was in the old days, because it definitely exists.
There's no such thing as a post-racial society.
No such thing as a post-racial society, and I guess to feel racism is to know racism, to feel how, racism works in its really insidious natures and ways, that it isn't just about being called the N-word. It isn't just about being, assaulted on the street. It's about the engagement. It's about that look. It's about that interaction. It's not about me being hypersensitive. It's not about me misreading a situation. I know racism when I feel racism, when I see racism, because I have never and will never, I don't think, live in a post-racial society. So we are racialised from the moment that we're born. We are racialised. And so when I'm engaging with children at the nursery, and the practitioners that I employ, when they are engaging with the children in the nursery, they have to be aware of the fact that this is black children that we're dealing with. This is brown children that we're dealing with. These are newly arrived families that we are dealing with. This is Britain. And there has to be an acute awareness of that.
What I liked about this morning is that the children look happy.
Yes.
And you did something this morning which I really liked, where you talked about Goldilocks. And Goldilocks obviously was a black girl.
Yeah. And I like that you said obviously, because of course Goldilocks was a black girl.
Yeah, so the thing is, what other ways have you apply those things so the children are very confident about their African
absolutely. And this was such a nice thing, because the mixing of traditional storytelling and the oral tradition of storytelling, looking at storytelling through the African lens. This is an African tradition. It exists in lots of communities and lots of cultures, but here I'm dealing with black children, so therefore I'm looking at things through the black lens. And the tradition, as I said, of storytelling from an African perspective has got to be married with the fact that we're in Britain. And Goldilocks and the Three Bears is quite a common story. Children are going to get to know about this story, and they're going to engage with that story, whether that be in a storybook, whether that be in primary school, reception. They're going to come across it. What better way to come across it than to come across it through a black lens? Perhaps looking at how we can retell that story and think about how we are narrating that story. So we've got a big display in our preschool room at the moment with Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but Goldilocks has got brown skin and black hair. And there are three bears there as well, and they're the animals. And we know the story of Goldilocks going into people's houses and eating porridge. And that porridge is cornmeal porridge.
Hey,
yeah, so
yeah.
the children are aware that the story can be reframed, the narrative can be retold from a perspective that they can relate to. And one of the questions that I asked the children when I was showing you around and introducing you to them is, who else has got a face like Goldilocks? Who looks like Goldilocks? Who else looks like this person on our display? And you heard the children saying, oh yeah, I've got a brown face as well. Oh, I've got black hair. Oh, so is this person, so is this person. So that relatability is so key. Now, if I was just to put, you know, there is a version of Goldilocks with blonde hair because she's got gold hair, gold locks, and a white face. That display, you know, there's a feature of that person in the room as well. But it's important that we also, as I said, give a different perspective and have the black Goldilocks, as, you know, too. And so the children are able to see it in its traditional British sense. But Britishness is evolving, and that's what we have to get these children aware of, because these are children who are here, they're 3 and they're 4 years old in 2019, and Britishness isn't just white face, blonde hair. That's dead now. It's a different thing. A long time.
Even at this tender age, Liz says that some of these black children have been singled out in mainstream nurseries and labelled as being problematic, and that's why they've come to her.
Describe some of the problems that black parents have had elsewhere that bring them to your nursery.
We have 4 or 5 children who have come from nurseries, mainstream nurseries, where parents have told me that the demographic of the nursery is predominantly white and there have been labels around their particular children. And I think it's more a lack of understanding in the mainstream about how to manage certain behaviours. If it's not something that they perhaps have seen before. When I say behaviour, really what I'm talking about is just personality.
Put your toys down, please.
It'd be nice to say that, oh, I knew you before the BBC documentary, but I didn't. I didn't know you before that, but that's how I first got into you.
That's 2016, I think.
And then what was good, I saw that you talked about a particular young child that had been basically, correct me if I'm wrong, pushed out of that nursery.
Yeah, he'd been pushed out of another nursery.
And he came to
and then he
nursery,
came here.
and
Yeah.
kind of made, it enhanced his development.
1000%. 1000.
I wanted to talk about, like, I don't want to just talk about negativity, but that is a negative that's turned into a positive.
Absolutely.
Can you explain, like, the process, what kind of...
Yeah, that process with him, in particular, he... amazing little boy. Him and his brother used to come to the nursery, and Mum was a young mum, and she had really struggled in getting acceptance for her son's personality. I'm not even going to call it behaviour, his personality. This is who he was. He liked to talk, he liked to express himself, he liked to say if he thought that things weren't right. You know, if he felt hard done by, he's going to tell you, like, that's not fair. I don't want to do that. Why should I have to come out of the room? I don't know. And he was very expressive, and I loved that about his character. An amazing young man. So he came to me at 2 years old, because apparently his behaviour was so bad. You know, he'd thrown a chair. You know, he'd had the terrible twos, which, you know, looking at it through the white lens, you know, the yummy mummies. You know, to have the terrible twos is very normal. You know, to fling yourself on in the aisle in Asda, that's normal. You know, when you're a white mother and you have a white child doing that, that's just what they do. A black child now is a problem. There's no second chance here. You fling yourself somewhere in this terrible twos because, you know, the age and the emotional development and the hardwiring of your brain and the growth that's happening at that age is the reason why there are so many different emotional responses to things. It is not called the terrible twos for no reason. So that particular boy was experiencing that because it's very, very normal. What happened is that the nursery that he was at, they were not equipped to deal with behaviour management, with the emotional development of a child, any child. And you could clearly see that a labelling process had taken place, because he was then quickly labelled the naughty, disruptive, bad one. And that message being given to mum at handover, because handover in nurseries, you know, it's in front of the child.
Yeah.
It's very
I was
intimate.
thinking of that, yeah.
So when you're being told, well, he didn't behave well today, and he is standing there.
And there's normally sometimes other parents.
Absolutely.
So what is that parent
There
possibly
you go.
saying to
There you go. To their child when they go home.
And their child might be even worse.
Absolutely. And then what happens is that commonly you'll know if you have children in nursery or primary school, guess what? Such and such his mum. He did this today before even handover takes place. You know, the children are already being brainwashed into labelling that child in their class as, and I said in the programme, it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if he's told that he's naughty, he isn't given that second chance that perhaps another child is given, that's only going to cause one reaction, frustration.
In terms of your own practice, it might not be in the mainstream, and you might have already mentioned it, so if you've already mentioned it, don't need to mention it again. But is there anything that is probably not stated in the curriculum or not a general thing that you make sure that your children here experience before they go into the primary setting?
Yeah, blackness everywhere.
Okay, there you go.
Blackness everywhere. That nursery manager's black, and the deputy manager's black, and the nursery cook is black, and the woman that owns the business is black, and that everybody knows everybody on a first name basis, and that is embedded within the psyche of the children from a very early age, so it becomes normalised. That is not in the curriculum, it's not explicitly stated. There's an assumption that's made. It doesn't matter, as long as you know the curriculum, you know how to teach, and that'll be fine. I'm a secondary school teacher by qualification, and when I spent time in secondary teaching, behaviour management would come up time and time again, and I taught in a girls' school, and that girls' school was predominantly black, and those black girls, again, affinity, they looked for it. And when behaviour management situations would arise at the school, you know, the teacher who was the NQT, who had lived in a little village and had never been in an inner city, was crying in her classroom because such and such dashed a chair. Listen, you could never come into, I was Miss Kerr at the time, you could never come into Miss Kerr's classroom and dash no chair, you're mad. You need to come out. However, the black girls understood through affinity, that can't run here. Now, I bumped into an ex-student of mine 2 days ago at Craig Pinkney's talk. Big up Craig each and every time. And I sat down and this ex-student of mine was like, oh my gosh, Miss Kerr. And she was retelling my friend who I was with about the kind of teacher that I was. She's 22 now. And it was really interesting listening to her speak about me. And she said, yo, Miss Kerr was sick, you know, like, you just knew it weren't that. If you were going into her classroom, you just knew. Like, you couldn't get on no foolishness like you could with Miss such and such and Mr. such and such. And it's because she was black, you just knew. But she weren't black like, I'm not black, don't tell anybody that I'm black. She was black.
Yeah, overtly black.
Overtly.
Black. Proudly black.
Proudly black. And letting them know what it was from the start, from the get. And that has to exist throughout
very important.
The education system.
I just feel that sometimes there are some people, thankfully not in my workplace, but there are some people that want to hide away from something. And I think the more you hide away from it, it damages you and it damages the children.
1,000%.
So
that leads to mental health.
It does.
You need to be unapologetically yourself in every space, because 100%. White people can be unapologetically themselves in every space.
And you feel like you're suffocating if you're not.
1,000%. And it is damaging. Again, that is taken for granted.
Yeah.
But it's a real situation.
My thing is that there's always this conversation about black men not going into the teaching field.
Yeah.
I think personally, the reason why black men don't go in, and men in general, I should say, is because of it's predominantly women. Also, I think it's not a very highly paid field, and regardless of whether you're a 21st century person or whatever, there's always a responsibility as a man to take care of the home.
Yeah.
Even though in most cases, these
days,
it's not actually like that. It's 50-50.
But when you look at, sorry to cut you, head teachership, head teachers are men.
True.
Predominantly.
You think so?
Definitely.
I think they're creeping in, but
they're creeping in.
They're creeping in, but I see a lot of women still. That's my maybe Birmingham might be
maybe
different, but I see a
and
lot
a particular
of
kind of man, a white man.
Yeah, middle class
white man who has the answers, has the ideas, knows what's going to work. And yeah, sometimes it does, you know. But a lot of the time, what's overlooked is culture cultural compatibility and cultural awareness and understanding. Because we're living in a society where black and brown families don't often have the choice about where to send their children to school.
Very true.
You are going to the school in the area that you live in. And that area that you live in may also be reflective of the community and that you are a part of. It may not be. But if we think about Birmingham as a city, you know, the inner cities, go and look at the head teachers of the inner city schools in Birmingham, the inner city primary schools, inner city secondary schools, black head teachers within those inner city schools who are going to be serving black and brown families, very few and far between.
Very few. I think in the local authority that I live in, which has a, funny enough, it's next to a town that was traditionally known for having more black people. It's one of the most well-known towns in England for having a lot of black people. My borough now has more black people, which is incredible because you never would have thought that at one point. But yet they're out of, I think it's 90 plus primary schools. I think it is. There's one.
Can you imagine?
One.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, which is shocking considering the demographics, because you come across a lot of, especially particularly the church schools have a lot of African
Yeah.
There's one.
Absolutely. One. And that isn't by accident, that's by design. This isn't because there aren't enough good black head teachers or black teachers. This is because there's a glass ceiling, you know, that is very, very evident. Of course there are thousands of educated, well-equipped, knowledgeable black educators, educarers, but how are they helped in terms of their career progression? How are they enabled to get to the next stage in their career? How are they engendered to do that and encouraged to do that? How are they supported to do that by senior leadership? I spoke earlier about my deputy manager here being a black woman who I have employed since she was 21. She has been through 2 maternity leaves and come back. You know, she has been very, very instrumental in the work that has happened at this nursery, you know, in lots of different ways, shapes and forms. The deputy manager before that, another young black woman. The deputy manager before that, a young black woman. So these are things that have been purposeful because I have engendered, encouraged, supported these black women to grow within their roles and to obtain some kind of professional experience and academic experience, because I've encouraged them to study alongside what they've been doing here. So they've gone and got, you know, degrees in family and communities, you know, in early years, in areas that they can kind of use these degrees to go and work in different sectors of education. So that mentorship is something that is very, very much missing, I think, from the education system in the UK, in Britain. And if we are living in this multicultural, multiracial society, where is that then? Where is that reflected within these sectors? Where?
It's definitely not. That's and also, it's this morning when I came in and the little boy went, "Daddy," and I was like, you know, I'm not dad. And you commented on it before we started, and how important is it for black men to then be in the school education setting to you?
You know, it's so important. I have never had a predominantly black male staff team. I don't know any nursery setting in the UK that's had a predominantly black male staff team. There are loads of nurseries in the UK have got predominantly white female staff teams with children who are coming from every single demographic, but all the staff are white. Every single one of the staff are white. Dangerous. Because if we're looking at the context of the societies that these children are growing up in and where these practitioners are coming from, how are they going to be able to support these children culturally? All black children have a black father. You know, They may not be in their lives every day, but they may be in their children's lives every day. But there seems to be this myth that's perpetuated that black men shouldn't be working in early years sectors. And this myth is perpetuated by society. It's not just black men, it's men in general. However, I've always endeavoured to have men in the early years setting in some way, shape or form, whether that be on a permanent basis, whether that be on a temporary, whether that be somebody from the community coming in, whether that be somebody who comes in just as a workshop. It could be, you know, a drumming workshop, a chess tutor. Having and getting black men into a setting where there are black children it's so important. I cannot even stress the importance. And when you came in today as a black man, a visible black man with locks, all of these things, and a beard, these things really, that child that called you daddy is a 1-year-old. He's 1 year old. These are the first formations of words and language and communication. And he pointed to you without prompt and said, "Daddy, daddy." And that isn't the first time that that's happened. Not just with that child. That happened and has happened over the 16 years that I've been managing. I've been here. It always happens. You know, if a black man comes in, more often than not, a child's going to say, "Oh, daddy." There's always going to be that. Now, that shows that there's a gap. There's something that's lacking. And it isn't always the fault of the black father in his absence. That absence isn't always something that can be controlled by him. Absence happens for a number of reasons, but we need to stop selling this narrative that black men choose not to be in their children's lives. That's a falsehood. Of course, yes, that happens. Like with any demographic, you know, fathers are not in their children's lives because they choose not to, but that is not the only reason that black fathers are not in their children's lives. There are a number of things that impact black men that do not impact other men in society. That's just a fact. And it can sometimes lead to the absence of that man in their child's life. And it will mean that a void is there and it needs to be filled, and the child seeks it out and wants it and calls out for it, as you saw, in the most, you know, unprompted sense. And there's also ways in which black children might internalise that as they're growing up, they're going through life, they're looking at how life is shaping out, they're looking at their peers, they're thinking about experiences that they may have that they might not have been able to share with their dad because their dad might not have been there. Or absences can also exist with that black father being in the household. He just might not be an active black father, unavailable. Emotionally unavailable. And where are the tools that we should be giving black men in encouraging them to be emotionally available, to be emotionally intelligent? And this is not all black men. I do have to make that really, really obvious in what I'm saying, because it's not something that is applicable to all black men, but it is something that I think all black men have an awareness of. Certainly in my experience being here, you know, black men have always wanted to be a part of their children's lives and have fought to be a part of their children's life if their relationship with the mother's broken down, or if they have not been in an economic situation to kind of get to their child because they might live in another city. You know, education around relationships is something that has to be built for men and women. Education around how relationships are formed and how relationships can be, you know, prolonged is something and is a tool that needs to be given to black women, black men. It's something that we talk about, and we need to talk about in the educational sense, in an early years environment. And I do a lot of family support work here in repairing sometimes those relationships when they've gone askew or they've, you know, not worked out. Because at the centre of this relationship, sometimes a child's being born. And it doesn't actually matter how you feel about one another as parents, but it does matter how you feel about the child. And the feelings that you have towards one another, whatever it is, there has to be a baseline level of respect in order for us to offer the best possible care, love, emotional availability for that child. Because if it's not there, it's lacking and it's evident, and it presents itself in lots of different ways along the child's life. But it is not the only reason for a child's success or failure because their dad wasn't there. There's plenty of things and stories and instances where this child has grown up with their mother and their mother alone, and the father hasn't been there because he may have passed away at an early age. You know, that dad might not have been there because he might be incarcerated at the time. You know, and even looking at that, forging relationships by making sure that your child goes to visit their father in prison, if that's where the father happens to be. I actively encourage that. That happens here and has always happened here because we know disproportionately black men are more likely to be put in jail than white men. So of course, in the time that I've been here, that's always been something that's been a feature. You'll see dad's got locked up. I encourage the moms to make sure that stigma around whatever they feel could be looked upon as, oh, this is, you know, it's really bad, I don't want to take my child to... But guess what? Your child needs to have a relationship with their dad. Because
they're going to find out about his history eventually. Anyway.
There you go. And the severing of that relationship through, you know, the interjection of prison and being arrested and whatever, that has massive impacts on that child's development. So making sure that where possible, that relationship, that bond can be kept, maintained or built if necessary, because it's never too late. It's never too late. We're young, you know, black people, and we would have both had experiences of our friends or partners or whatever, you know, forging relationships in their 20s, in their 30s with their fathers, or sometimes with their mothers, you know, because absent mothering is a thing too.
Absolutely.
Sometimes mothers are not able to be mothers to their children because of postnatal depression in general that could last. Mental health across the board, abuse, domestic violence, all of these things, a lot of factors that come into play, and there are a lot of factors that disproportionately impact black families.
What was good about you and your upbringing is that your parents were very active.
Absolutely.
So if they were, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to say 5 things, I'm not going to say 4 things. It could be just 1, it could be just 2. But for a parent watching this, what advice would you give to them to make sure that they're instilling particular things in their child as soon as they're going to primary school?
Celebrate your child, celebrate your child, celebrate your child. Every day, celebrate your child. Not every day. Tell your child, make sure you behave today. There's something within that is about making sure that you've got an expectation for the behaviour, but the wording of that statement, make sure you behave, make sure you're good, that also signals something that's quite negative, and it nurtures something within the psyche of the child which is unnecessary. Celebrating your child by saying things like, you are so fantastic, wow, you look amazing today, oh, your hair is so beautiful, and be animated in that celebration. Can't be deadpan. I always say to my practitioners here, CBeebies, use that CBeebies voice all the time and be animated, be excited about your child. There's nothing better than being excited about seeing somebody. If you go and see somebody that you haven't seen for a long time, or even if you go and link up with your friends, you want them to be excited to see you, there has to be that, yo, what, go on, you all right? We are expressive people, and that can't be lost in parenting. And it's tiring because it's relentless. Parenting is 24/7. It never ends. We have to find that energy, I guess, from somewhere, because the children need it. When you are working with children, when you're parenting children, to celebrate them holds such value, and the excitement that is retained from that celebration means more to children than any expensive toy. Seriously, any expensive toy, any resource. The celebration of your child, the celebration of your black child, the celebration of every element of your black child is key. And it means talking about the things that you know as an adult, society is going to tell your child is bad. You are at an advantage. You're a parent, you're an adult. If you've grown, you've been born in, you know, the UK, you know how racism works. You'll have seen it, you'll have experienced it. So it means you have to counteract that explicitly when you are parenting. So it is about saying the hair thing is a big thing. Talking about how amazing that child's hair is, how it feels, how it looks, how beautiful it is. Whatever condition you feel the child's hair is in. You know, society's going to tell you your child that their hair's it's not professional. It's messy. Skin tone, we cannot overlook that. These statements, you know, from the blaxploitation era, you know, from civil rights in America and the black is beautiful, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. You know, we have to make sure that we're adopting that in 2019 because it isn't explicitly, overtly stated. We're still dealing with colorism on many, many, many scales, and it's shocking. But in my preschool room, you might have seen we've got a whole wall display of different black women of all different shades with all different hairstyles. Yeah. So having the pictures, having the magazine cutouts, having something as a point of reference for the children, the girls to look at and the boys to look at as well, and talking about, oh, that lady's so beautiful. When you're on the street with your child, pointing to other black women, other black men, talking to other black women and other black men, talking to our elders. When I go out and I see an elder, I'll always say morning or afternoon or evening, because this is something that's very rooted in African community and Caribbean community. We greet our elders, but tell somebody else as well, like, you look really nice, that dress is so lovely, or I like your coat, you know. But doing that with your child, witnessing those things, so it becomes an exchange that child is used to, like, to celebrate.
I want to end with a bit of positivity, because there has been positive things throughout this.
Of course,
but your mum, your father, yourself have worked very hard to establish this and keep it going. But I think there's always people that support you.
Totally.
So for you, is there anyone, or even if it's groups, it doesn't have to be individual, it can be whoever, but is there anyone that you would like to celebrate that comes to mind?
Who supported me in this journey by name.
It could be a group of people.
There are hosts of people, there are groups. You know, we always talk about it takes a village. It takes a village not just to raise a child, but it takes a village to also support and raise individuals in their successes and in their failures. I am very fortunate to have an amazing group of friends in lots of different pockets. And those groups of friends individually look out for my best interests and look out for my well-being. Friends have always been something that, you know, my mom would tell you, you know, she has dissuaded me from having, like, friends are not important, blah, blah. Friends have always been very important to me. Even more important is having my sisters as friends.
Oh, brilliant.
My two sisters are my very best friends. I don't use best friends, but my sisters are my best friends. And it's not until kind of coming out into the world that I realised that not everybody has that relationship with their siblings, but my siblings are the backbone. Where and when we can. One of my sisters is in London. One of my sisters lives about 15 minutes away from me, you know, but when we come together, we talk every day anyway in the WhatsApp group or on the phone, but when we come together physically, we do that as often as possible. Nothing can come in between that, and anybody that knows me knows, you know, my sisters are the most important thing to me, and have been the people that are my confidants, people that support, people that celebrate, people that pick me up, and people that just, they get me, because obviously we've been brought up together, we've grown together, and we've been parented. We've been parented though, in a way. We've been nurtured to be one another's cheerleaders. So as much as I have lots of different groups of friends, sisters have been very, very important to this and to me. Keep it in the family.
Okay. Also, I was thinking, because this is a business, I think about, because we're both born in England, as far as I know. You're born in
absolutely,
Ghana. And I think about parents and grandparents and what or uncles, aunties, whoever. But what's very interesting is that people want to see more African business, more African Caribbean business. And what's interesting is that I compare the UK dynamic to a US dynamic, where Caribbean people live in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, New York, Atlanta, these places. And there's a lot more businesses. And wherever you migrated to, or if you still live in the Caribbean, what's very interesting, there's always been this obsession with land. You must get land. And so for me, it's it's not that Caribbean people are not into buying land, they're not entrepreneurial. It's quite the opposite, especially when you go to the US, you can see that. What do you think is that happened here where there hasn't been that growth? Because you can see it in the Asian community in Birmingham for definite. But what do you think it is, and do you think it's very important that people start doing what your family did? It's very important to mention that your parents actually said, okay, this is what we're doing this. This needs to get done. And it's not just your parents, your grandparents.
Of course. So, of course it's important, you know, business creates economic stability, it creates economic wealth, it creates intergenerational wealth, and we can't be relying on just looking at celebrities to do that for us. We cannot do that. We need to move away from that. Having said that, there are a plethora of black businesses in Birmingham.
Okay.
And that's really important to be aware of. You need to go and seek them out. They're there. You need to go and seek them out. There are bakeries, there are shops, there are nurseries. There are black families and black businesses that are creating economic wealth, and there are a lot of young black entrepreneurs in the UK. London, of course, that's the capital. There's a lot going on, and now we have the rise of social media. We're able to look into and see how black wealth, the black pound, is being created. I would say that we shouldn't overlook the importance of it, and we should strive to make sure that these things are discussed within the family, that these things are planned and they're thought out, that you should be singing from the same hymn sheet. If you have a partner, if you have a husband, if you have a wife, if you have a group of friends, listen, whoever your unit is, you all need to be singing from the same hymn sheet. You all need to be looking at creating the same thing if you're going to create wealth or create a business. And a business can be anything, remember that. It doesn't have to be a massive big thing. It's taken some 30 years to get to me having this here. Yes, it's intergenerational. Yes, it's a business that my mother bought and created, but it's a business that I have then took on and learned along the way as well. Nothing has been handed to me in terms of this is it now, the end. I've had to learn in this process. And anybody that has ever worked for me, with me, for my mom, with my mom, has been there to witness the cussings that I've got, the stringent way in which I've had to be managed in and through certain situations. They're foundation things for me. It isn't a matter of, we're not going to be able to do this because we're black. It's a matter of, we are going to do this, right, because we are black. This has to happen. This can't not happen. But there also needs to be a period of reflection and balance, because we can get lost in the importance of, of course, economic wealth and economic foundation. It needs to happen, but we can't get lost in that being the only motivator. There has to be an element of legacy within what we're doing, and there has to be an element of passing the torch. There has to be an element of, I should not have to be here all day, every day, because I should be creating, as I'm moving along, another generation, another group of people who have been taught the skills that I have been taught, so that they can go and recreate this anywhere. Edgbaston Park Day Nursery is not going to be like the only thing that's here forever and ever and ever and ever, amen. Hopefully all of the hundreds of people that have kind of passed through my staff team, the hundreds of black women have passed through my staff team, will learn some of these skills that I have learnt, and think about, I'm going to set up something like this, or I'm going to create something that can generate this, or I'm going to, the element of business and the conversation around entrepreneurship and business and wealth creation should be happening all the time. And I think it does in circles, but the intergenerational element of it is also something that shouldn't be overlooked. We should be talking to our elders. People in the community who've had business and who have retired. People in the community who have had access to business planning. Speaking to them, because we don't have the answers. We don't have all the answers anyway. Yeah, we are living in a technological age. Yeah, my mum might have created the policies and procedures for this nursery on a typewriter, and now I'm doing it on a computer. And now I'm interjecting, you know, an Instagram page for what I'm doing. It's not something that my mum necessarily would have thought was a good idea. Now I'm doing things that involve the media, and I'm talking to the BBC. I'm talking on platforms independent like this. I'm able to have a conversation, meet you at the Impact Hub and be like, yeah, I'm down. Anybody that asks me to do anything and it's community based, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a part of whatever things are offered to me, because it's important that we start sharing this knowledge and we're not insular in what we're doing, because it's only through this that we can create platforms where people can access knowledge and information, and we can be open about it as well.
I have 2 more questions. I can put this into 3. What do you love most, and what drives you the most?
What I love most is, in terms of the nursery, I love the children and I love the families, and the children and the families drive me. They are the people that get me here at 7 o'clock in the morning. I love giving to our community, our black families. I love the reactions and the responses that I get from the families. I love that nothing can't break us. Ofsted can't break us, you know. Whatever judgment Ofsted ever come out and give us, we've been outstanding. We're now inadequate. We've had requires improvement. That judgment's never meant anything to the families and the children that we provide a service for. That has kept me going, the children and the families.
Okay. And hey, one day you're going to be, I don't know, 84, 85,
Absolutely.
86, maybe 90.
I hope
you
so.
might have lots of nieces and nephews running around. You might have your grandchildren, children, family. Even you can consider these children.
Absolutely,
as
yeah.
They may be around you. When you get to that point, or even everybody has to pass.
Yeah, of course.
What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to be remembered for?
Liz was there. I want to be remembered for being here, for being on the front line, for not being somebody who was behind the scenes and saying, you know, it's easy, you can do this, you can do that, that I was visible in this movement, because it is a movement, it's a renaissance. Something's happening, something's shifting. We're in a very brand new political climate. We're in a very brand new socio-economic climate. And I want to be remembered as somebody who was there. I was on the front line and I was actually doing the work and empowering others to do the work.